Jack and the Pirate School, Part 1. Hello, this is Natasha, and I'm just dropping by with a story of Jack and the Pirate School. Would you like to hear it? Have you got your cutlasses ready? And fed the parrot? All right then, I'll begin. Once upon a time, there was a boy called Jack. He was 7, and Jack had 6 sisters, but no brothers. And they were really, really girly. All day long they'd play with their dolls and with their beauty salon, and twirl around in their pink ballet tutus. Jack thought it was really, really boring. How about a game of pirates? Jack used to say every morning when they didn't have to go to school. And sometimes his sisters would agree. But their idea of playing pirates was to sit all the rogues and ruffians and cutthroats around in a circle and serve cups of tea and slices of cake. They didn't want to make people walk the plank or hunt for buried treasure or anything. And Jack just got fed up and so went to play pirates by himself. Then one day they were all sitting at lunch when Jack's father asked him if he wanted to go to sailing school in the summer holidays. Yeah, said Jack. That sounds great. And so it was agreed. In the summer holidays, Jack would go off to sailing school for a few days. Just one thing, Jack, said his father. Make sure you aren't captured by any pirates. And all his sisters laughed. Because they might hold you to ransom for £1 million, said his father. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, said Jack. The rascals and ruffians can never capture me. I just fight them off. And he made a slashing motion with his hands as if he was waving a cutlass through the air. See, like this, said Jack. Boom, baff, biff. And all his sisters rolled their eyes. That's agreed then, said his father. Jack was so excited. He could hardly wait for the school term to end. All day long he would sit at his desk at school, dreaming of how he was going to be out there on the ocean waves and wondering if there really were any pirates out there. Not that he'd mind if there were. He wasn't frightened of pirates. Finally, the big day arrived. It was the start of the summer holidays. Jack packed his bag very carefully. He had some clothes to wear and some sandwiches to eat, plus some swimming trunks in case he fell into the water, and a cutlass. Because, after all, you never know what kind of ruffians you're going to meet on the high seas. Of course, it was only a toy plastic cutlass. But never mind, thought Jack. Maybe he could just scare them away by waving it around a bit. He'd show 'em. His mum put him on the train and told him to be careful. And as he watched the countryside go by, Jack couldn't wait to see the ocean. Finally, he could see the waves crashing against the shore, and soon afterward the train pulled up into the station. He climbed off the train and looked up and down the platform. And then he saw a man standing with a sign which said, "Boys who want a life on the ocean waves, please step this way." And so Jack walked towards him. "Excuse me," he said. It was at that point that he noticed a funny-looking parrot sitting on the man's shoulder. Excuse me," said Jack. "Yes, what is it?" said the man. "Is this the right place for the sailing school?" The man paused. "Ah!" squawked the parrot. "Sailing school? Ah!" "Shut up, you stupid bird," growled the man. Then he looked back at Jack. "Sailing school. You could say that," he said. "Step this way, young man." And so Jack followed him toward the car, and they drove to the port. "Who's a silly boy, then?" squawked the parrot. Or at least he did until the man whacked him around the beak. And then they climbed out of the car, and the man showed Jack the ship. But it wasn't the ship Jack was expecting. It was more of a galleon than a yacht, with huge sails and rigging and a crow's nest. I mean, said Jack nervously. But the man just pushed him up the stair so hard that Jack went flying across the deck. The next thing he knew, a very tall man was walking towards him, a man with a black cape and a wooden leg. He leant straight into Jack's face.
"Welcome to the pirate school, young man," he boomed, "where we'll teach you everything you need to know for a life of mayhem and treachery on the high seas. I hope you like excitement, young man, because from now on you're going to have plenty of it."
"Excitement is just what I love most of all," said Jack. And then he felt a tiny bit frightened. And that's the first part of Jack and the Pirate School. Gosh, that was exciting, wasn't it? I do hope Jack is going to be okay. Bertie said he'd tell me a bit more about Jack and the Pirate School soon. So keep visiting storynori.com for more great adventures. And remember, if you go to storynori.com, you can buy Bertie's very own book. It's all about Prince Bertie the Frog and all his friends. So until next time, from me, Natasha, bye-bye! Jack and the Pirate School, Part 2. Hello, this is Natasha, and I'm dropping by with a second story about Jack and the Pirate School. I can tell you that Prince Bertie the Frog is really excited because he loves stories about pirates. Tim the Tadpole is so excited he wants to hop up and down, except he hasn't got any legs. In part 1, if you recall, Jack, who loved playing pirates more than anything else in the world, was sent to sailing school by his father. But there was a mix-up at the station, and instead of finding himself at sailing school, Jack found himself at pirate school instead. Would you like to hear part 2? You would? Then get your cutlass ready and hang on to the rigging, and I'll begin. He was lying on the deck, and Captain Blackheart was leaning over him.
"Welcome to the pirate school, young man," he boomed. "I hope you like excitement, young man, because from now on you're going to have plenty of it."
"Excitement is just what I love most of all," said Jack. And then he felt a tiny bit frightened. "But I think I was meant to be at sailing school, not pirate school."
"Sailing school?"
roared Captain Blackheart,
and then roared with laughter. "Did you hear that, my hearties?"
He looked around the deck, and Jack looked around as well, And all across the deck he could see about 20 pirates, and they were the worst, most desperate-looking ruffians he had ever seen. They wore striped vests and old shoes, and they had dirt all over their faces and hands. And as soon as Captain Blackheart laughed, they all laughed as well.
"Sailing school, you say?" said Captain Blackheart. "Well, we'll teach you all you need to know right here, won't we, lads?"
And all the pirates laughed even louder.
"Our men can unfurl the rigging with one hand, cut a man down with their cutlass with the other, and fire a broadside of cannon right into the black, cruel hearts of the enemy with their big toe. Isn't that better than sailing school?"
"Yes, I suppose so," said Jack.
"Because sailing school is for girls."
"I wouldn't want that," said Jack. "I'd much rather learn how to be a pirate."
"Then let's begin, my lad," said Captain Blackheart, "and we'll make a pirate out of you before the day is done, that we will."
And then he picked up Jack with both hands and hurled him across the open deck of the ship.
"Get yourself kitted out!"
Jack went hurtling back across the deck, and then fell down the stairs and went tumbling, 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 until he was lying flat out on the downstairs deck.
"Ouch!"
said Jack.
"That hurts."
A boy was standing right next to him. He looked about 9 to Jack, and he was dressed in old rags, and his face was covered in dirt.
"Hurt, did it?"
said the boy. "It did just a bit," said Jack, climbing to his feet. Just then the boy clipped him around the head, and Jack fell over again. "Ouch!"
"I hope you're not a sissy,"
said the boy, reaching down to help Jack up,
"because we got no room for sissies, not on board Captain Blackheart's ship."
No, said Jack.
"I'm as tough as, well, the toughest thing you can think of."
"That's all right then." The boy put out a hand. "My name's Ben. I'm the cabin boy round here." He looked Jack up and down.
"You can't wear that stuff," he said. "We'll get you some proper clothes."
And Ben walked across to a big chest. He pushed aside a snake that just happened to be sitting on top of it, and pulled it open.
"Here, take your pick," he said.
Inside the chest there was a collection of the dirtiest, oiliest, meanest-looking rags you had ever seen. Jack pulled out an old battered pair of trousers and a striped vest and pulled them on. Then he messed up his hair a bit and spread some grime across his face. It was just the sort of thing that made his mum really cross. "I'm going to enjoy being a pirate," he thought to himself. "There's just one thing. I better tell Mum and Dad I'm not at sailing school." So he walked up onto the deck until he saw Captain Blackheart. He was standing at the wheel of the ship with the parrot at his shoulder.
"Ah, Jack, my lad, he looked like a regular ruffian," said Captain Blackheart.
"Thanks, sir," he said. "But I just wanted to tell my Mum and Dad that I'm at pirate school, not sailing school." And suddenly Captain Blackheart looked very cross, and the whole ship went silent, so that all Jack could hear was the rustling of the wind through the sails. All the pirates were edging close towards him until Jack was completely surrounded. "We don't tell parents that anyone is at pirate school," he said, in a voice so menacing it sent a shiver down Jack's spine. And then he roared with laughter. And all the pirates laughed with him, and even Ben was laughing. "Because you're a prisoner!" roared Captain Blackheart. "A prisoner?" said Jack. "Oh, you're not scared, are you, Jack?" said Captain Blackheart. "Me? Scared?" said Jack, just a little nervously. "Nah." And that was the second part of Jack and the Pirate School. Even more terrifying than the first part, I think you'll agree. If you want to find out what happens next about Jack and all his adventures on the high seas, keep dropping by at storynori.com, where you'll find loads more stories too. Until then, from me, Natasha, bye-bye. Jack and the Pirate School, Part 3. Hello, this is Natasha. And if, like Bertie, you've been waiting on tender hooks for the next part of Jack's adventures at the Pirate School, here it is. Just in case you can't quite remember what happened so far, Jack was a boy of 7 who went off to sailing school one summer. But there was a bit of a mix-up, and Jack found himself at pirate school instead. He'd been dressed in old rags by the cabin boy Ben. But when he asked to tell his mum and dad where he was, it turned out he'd been taken prisoner. "We don't tell parents that anyone is at pirate school," said Captain Blackheart, in a voice so menacing it sent a shiver down Jack's spine. And then he roared with laughter, and all the pirates laughed with him. Even Ben was laughing. "Because you're a prisoner!" roared Captain Blackheart. "A prisoner?" said Jack. "Oh, you're not scared, are you, Jack?" said Captain Blackheart. "Me? Scared?" said Jack, just a little nervously. "Nah." "Well, that's good then, my hearty, because there's no room for scaredy cats on this pirate ship." And saying that, Captain Blackheart waved his rusty hook through the air. "All the men on this ship have left their families behind many years ago, and they all joined us boys," the captain continued. He pointed to the rogues and ruffians lined up on the deck. "How many years since you saw your family, Black Spot?" An ugly-looking ruffian with a giant black spot on his face stepped forward. "I reckon it'll be 20 years, Captain." "How about you, One Leg?" A vicious-looking rascal with a stump where his leg should be stepped forward. "At least 50 years, Captain," he said. "And you, Razor? What about you?" And a pirate with the biggest nose that Jack had ever seen stepped forward. "At least 100 years, Captain." "So you see, lad, when you sign up with Captain Blackheart's pirate ship, you leave your family behind forever." "But we'd all rather sail the 7 seas with Captain Blackheart," cried the pirates with one voice. "And so would I," said Jack. "Except he wasn't really so sure, because 100 years at sea seemed an awfully long time. Still, never mind, he thought. It looks like great fun. More fun than playing with his silly and soppy 6 sisters back at home, anyway. "So how do I start being a pirate, sir?" asked Jack. Captain Blackheart scratched his chin with his rusty metal hook and thought for a moment. "You could start with climbing of the rigging," he said. "Or we could put you on crow's nest duty. Or maybe even a small lesson in how to set up a plank, so that any dastardly village we come across can be made to walk on it." "Cripes, that sounds like fun." "Indeed it does, my lad," said Captain Blackheart. "Then again, we could teach you how to fire a broadside, or practice sharpening your cutlasses." "Or raising the Jolly Roger," said Jack. "Aye, that and all, my lad," said the captain. "But first, you'll help Ben here make some lunch." And so Jack followed Ben down into the galley of the ship. It had been a long, long morning so far, and Jack was feeling a bit peckish. "I wonder what pirates have for lunch," thought Jack. At school they usually had chicken or chips or spag bol, or else fish fingers and beans, and there was often ice cream and apple crumble for pudding, and Jack usually polished it all off, and his sister's lunch as well, if there was any left. "I bet pirate grub is fantastic," he decided. "OK," said Ben. "You get the jellied sheep's eyes, and I'll slice up the snake." Jack felt a bit queasy all of a sudden, and a lot less hungry. "You do like sheep's eyes, don't you?" said Ben. "And snake." "Well, or if you prefer, we can move straight on to the stewed worms, or the bug burger." "Right, Jack felt his skin go a little green. "I hope you're not one of those sissy landlubbers who just likes bacon and sausages and fish fingers and all that type of grub," said Ben. "Because here on the pirate ship we eat sheep's eyes and worms and bugs and everything." "Right," said Jack. "Sounds great." And so they started on lunch. They tossed the sliced worms, they chopped the bug burgers, the sheep's eyes and the snake all into a big pot, and they stirred and stirred until a big stew was ready. And then they carried it up onto deck. Captain Blackheart's ship was a long way out to sea now, and Jack couldn't see any land at all. Whichever way you looked, there was just sea, sea, and more sea. And a fierce wind was starting to blow, making the ship rock from side to side, and there were big waves starting to splash across everyone. Ben put the bowl of stew down on the centre of the deck, and all the pirates lined up with their tin plates. Ben scooped out a big spoonful of stew into each one, and they gobbled it up. "Here's yours," said Ben, putting a big pile of stew on Jack's plate. It smelled horrible, like a pile of old socks and football jerseys. And as the wind blew, the ship rocked from side to side, and Jack began to feel a bit sick. "Don't waste it, lad," said Captain Blackheart. Jack took one small bite, and it was the most horrible thing he had ever tasted, even worse than Granny's beef stew, and that was so bad that all his sisters had to lie down after eating it. "I said don't waste it, lad," said Captain Blackheart. waving his hook at Jack. Jack tried another bite, but spat it out. "Is it the sheep's eyes or the sliced worm you don't like, lad?" said Captain Blackheart. "I put in some shark tongue," said Ben. "Maybe he doesn't like that." And at that moment, Jack felt so queasy he ran to the side of the ship and was violently sick. When he walked back, the captain was looking very serious indeed. "I don't think this lad's up for a life on the ocean," he said. "I reckon we'll put him up for ransom." "For ransom?" cried Jack. "Aye, lad," said Captain Blackheart. "I reckon your parents will pay a pretty penny to get you back. Better than see you walk the plank." And that's the third part of Jack and the Pirate School. Gosh, wasn't that exciting? I do hope Jack's going to be okay. Bertie said he'd tell me a bit more about Jack and the Pirate School soon. So keep visiting storynori.com for more great adventures. And remember, if you go to storynori.com, you can buy Bertie's very own book. It's all about Prince Bertie the Frog and all his friends. Until next time, from me, Natasha, bye-bye! Hello, this is Natasha, and today I'm here to tell you the story Nori of Jack and the Pirate School, Part 4. I can tell you that Prince Bertie the Frog is really excited because he loves stories about pirates. Would you like to hear Part 4? You would? Then get your cutlasses ready and hang on to the rigging, and I'll begin. Just in case you can't remember what happened so far, Jack was a boy of 7 who went off to sailing school one summer. But there was a bit of a mix-up, and Jack found himself at pirate school instead. But the lunch they made was so disgusting, Jack was sick, and Captain Blackheart decided to put him up for ransom. "For ransom!" cried Jack. "Aye, lad," said Captain Blackheart. "I reckon your parents will pay a pretty penny to get you back. Better than see you walk the plank." "Walk the plank?" cried Jack. "Well, of course," said Ben the cabin boy. "Anyone doesn't pay the ransom, we make them walk the plank. But don't worry, you won't drown. The sharks'll eat you in no time." Jack felt even queasier after that. "Black Spot," cried Captain Blackheart, "bring me that parrot." Jack watched the ugly-looking pirate called Black Spot walk across the deck. On his shoulder there was the very same parrot who he had seen at the railway station. "Walk the plank! Walk the plank!" squawked the parrot. "Shut up, you stupid bird!" growled Black Spot. From his overcoat, Captain Blackheart pulled out a piece of parchment and a bottle of ink. He grabbed hold of the parrot, plucked out a feather, and dipped it into the ink. "Ouch! That hurts!" screeched the parrot. "One more squawk out of you, birdie, and you'll be going in the stew," snarled Captain Blackheart. "Big meaty? What was that?" "I said, which stew?" "Shut up!" Then he looked up at Ben, handed him the feather, and told him to start writing. Because Ben, it turned out, was the only person on the ship who could read and write, even though he was only the cabin boy. Captain Blackheart scratched his chin with his hook and tried to think.
To Jack's parents, he began, and then he looked at Ben. Are you writing this down?
Yes, sir, said Ben.
Very well, said Captain Blackheart. To Jack's parents, allow me the honour of introducing myself. My name is Captain Blackheart, the meanest, cruellest black-hearted ruffian of the 7 seas and the 5 oceans, and I am honoured, sir, to make your acquaintance. Into my possession has fallen a boy called Jack, whom I believe is your son. Although you must be ashamed of the lily-livered little landlubber, and I could hardly blame you for disowning the cowardly wretch completely, on my first acquiring the said boy, my plan was to enrol Jack in my pirate school. I'd have taught him all the skills he needed for a life of mayhem, skullduggery, and piracy on the high seas. And yet, on the first day here, he has been sick. He doesn't like the food, and he doesn't care much for the waves either. In short, I am forced to conclude that he is nothing but a lily-livered landlubber. Therefore, I have no use for him. I will return him to you for a ransom of £1,000,000, paid in gold bullion or treasure. If we have not received our money in 7 days, then Jack will be forced to walk the plank, and you will never see him again. Yours, in dastardly anticipation, Captain Blackheart. P.S. If you happen to have a spare treasure map, send that as well. Have you got that, lad? He said, looking towards Ben. Indeed I have, Captain, said Ben. But, started Jack. Be quiet, growled Captain Blackheart. Be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, squawked the parrot. Silence! Roared Captain Blackheart. He folded up the letter, pressed a seal of a skull and crossbones onto it, and handed it across to the parrot. Now then, deliver that to Jack's parents, you useless bird, he said, and the parrot flapped his wings and flew away. Oh no, thought Jack, as Ben led him down to the galley. What's Dad going to say when he gets that? I'm in trouble now. The wind was blowing hard, and the ship was rocking from side to side. Jack lay down in the hammock in the cabin. He suddenly remembered what Dad had said to him about not being captured by pirates while he was away at pirate school. And Jack had said not to worry. He'd just fight them with his cutlasses. Oh, no, thought Jack. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Now they're going to make me walk the plank, and the sharks will eat me. Now it took the parrot quite a long time to fly all the way to Jack's house. That was partly because there was a storm blowing across the ocean, and partly because the parrot wasn't very fast, but mainly because he kept stopping for little snacks along the way. Still, finally he got there.
And when the parrot arrived, he could see Jack's 6 sisters, and they had just organised a tea party for their dolls in the garden. The parrot dropped down to the ground with the letter in its beak, and all the sisters flapped around, shouting and squeaking. "I'm looking for Jack's dad," said the parrot. And whilst he was at it, he grabbed a bit of the doll's cake and ate it all up. One of the little girls rushed inside, shouting, "Dad! Dad! There's a parrot here to see you!" But Jack's dad thought it was just a joke. Eventually he came outside and saw a slightly podgy-looking parrot polishing off its 3rd helping of cake. And there was a letter at its side. He picked up the letter and started to read. He frowned and scratched his head. And then he started to laugh.
"It says that Jack's been captured by pirates and is being held to ransom," he said.
"Oh, that's just Jack with his silly pirate games," said one of his sisters. "Remember, he said he'd fight them off with his plastic cutlasses," said another.
"You're quite right," Jack's dad decided,
and he sat down to write a reply.
"Dear Captain Blackheart," he began, "I too am honoured to make your acquaintance, dear sir. My son Jack, far from being a lily-livered landlubber, is the bravest boy who ever sailed the 7 seas. He assured me personally before he left that if he was captured by pirates, he would fight the rascals off with his cutlass. No force on earth can keep him prisoner, and certainly not the cowardly Captain Blackheart. Your faithful servant, Jack's dad. P.S. Your parrot has eaten all our cake."
And when he was finished, he handed the letter across to the parrot.
"Now, take that back to the captain, fatso bird," he said, "and don't delay."
The parrot flapped its wings, but was finding it quite hard to fly on account of all the cake it had just eaten. He flew across the land and then over the seas, until finally he landed on Captain Blackheart's pirate ship.
"Ah!" cried the captain. "So you've returned, my pretty bird. Let us see how soon that stupid boy's father plans to pay us our treasure."
Jack was already hard at work scrubbing the floor of the ship. He watched as Captain Blackheart handed the letter to Ben, because he was the only person who could read it. And Ben started to read. "Dear Captain Blackheart," he began, "I too am honoured to make your acquaintance, dear sir. My son Jack, far from being a lily-livered landlubber, is the bravest boy who ever sailed on the 7 seas. He assured me personally before he left that if he was to be captured by pirates, he would fight the rascals off with his cutlass."
"Oh no," thought Jack. "I was only joking."
And he could see Captain Blackheart growing redder and redder and redder,
as if he was about to explode.
"No force on earth can keep him prisoner, and certainly not the cowardly Captain Blackheart," continued Ben. "Your faithful servant, Jack's dad." There was a silence on board the ship. All the pirates were standing still, looking at the deck, and all you could hear was the rustling of the wind in the sails, whilst Captain Blackheart turned red, then green, then purple.
"Prepare the plank!"
he roared suddenly, and he looked at Jack. "Your father has gravely insulted this ship, sir," he snarled. "And 1 week from today, you will walk the plank." And that's the 4th part of Jack and the Pirate School. So hang on for the next part. It's coming soon. I do hope Jack's going to be okay. So keep visiting storynori.com for more great adventures. Until next time, from me, Natasha, bye-bye! Jack and the Pirate School, Part 5. Hello, this is Natasha, and here is the 5th and final part of Jack and the Pirate School. So get your cutlass ready and hang on to the rigging. Just in case you can't quite remember what happened so far, Jack was a boy of 7 who went off to sailing school one summer. But there was a bit of a mix-up, and Jack found himself at pirate school instead. But the lunch they made was so disgusting, Jack was sick, and Captain Blackheart decided to put him up for ransom. The trouble was, when Jack's father received the ransom demand, he thought it was a joke, because Jack was always talking about how he'd fight off the pirates. But when Captain Blackheart heard that, he condemned Jack to walk the plank. Captain Blackheart looked at Jack. "Your father has gravely insulted this ship, sir," he snarled. "And 1 week from today, you will walk the plank." Jack felt a bit nervous after he had heard that. "Take him to the hold," roared Captain Blackheart. Ben, the cabin boy, led Jack down into the hold. "Well, looks like it's the plank for you, old boy," said Ben. "Rotten luck." "I know," said Jack glumly. "Still, I suppose it'll be quick," said Ben. "A couple of bites from the shark and you'll be dead. Or maybe a giant octopus will strangle you. Or you could be eaten by a whale, or else just drown, I suppose." Jack gulped. "Still, a bit mean of your old man not to stump up the ransom," said Ben. "You see, the thing is, I always told stories and jokes about how I'd fight off the pirates," said Jack. "So I think he thought I was just messing around." "You mean you don't want to walk the plank?" said Ben. "I'd rather not," said Jack. Ben thought for a minute. "Then I suppose there's nothing else for it," he said. "We need a plan." And so the 2 boys sat down together. And they thought, and they thought, and they thought, until their heads hurt a bit. So they had a snack, and then they thought a bit more. And finally they came up with a brilliant wizard plan. But it was so clever that they decided not to tell anyone about it. For the next week, Jack worked really hard. He scrubbed the decks, he tightened the rigging, and he helped Ben cook all the horrible food down in the hold. And he soon found he was starting to quite enjoy life at pirate school. One of the men showed him how to man the crow's nest. Another showed him how to slash a cutlass. And another taught him how to fire a broadside of a cannon. It was all great fun. Even Captain Blackheart was starting to quite like Jack. "If you weren't such a lily-livered landlubber, my lad, I'd probably show you how to follow a buried treasure map," he said, ruffling Jack's hair with his rusty hook. "But as it is, I'll send you to a watery grave." Finally, 7 days were up. After the pirates had finished their breakfast of dried shark skin and boiled octopus eyes, Captain Blackheart took to the deck. 7 days have passed since we placed a ransom on Jack's head," he roared. "And still Jack's dad hasn't paid the money we demanded." He looked across at the parrot, who was in charge of all communications on board the ship. "Any word, bird?" "Not a whisper, Captain," squawked the parrot. "They can't like him very much." "Then prepare the plank, men," said Captain Blackheart. And all the pirates roared with laughter, because although they had been nice to Jack and quite liked him really, they were still mean-hearted ruffians. And they really all enjoyed making someone walk the plank. Jack slipped downstairs with Ben. "All ready?" Jack gulped. "I think so." Ben gave him a sheep's bladder from the larder, which Jack stuffed under his jumper, and then he gave him a straw. "Then let's go," said Ben, and they climbed back up on deck. The walking of the plank was scheduled for noon, because that's when the captain and the sharks liked their lunch. Jack walked up to the parrot. He stayed very quiet, then pulled out one of its feathers. "Awk!" screeched the parrot, and the noise was so huge, all the pirates crowded around to see what was happening. And while they were doing that, Ben slipped up to the captain's deck and reset the ship's wheel so that it would be sailing steadily towards shore. "Sorry about that, bird," said Jack. "He should be punished for that," squawked the parrot. "Well, I suppose I should," said Jack. "But since I'm being made to walk the plank at noon, I'm not really bothered." And all the rascals and ruffians laughed, even Captain Blackheart. 2 more hours passed. Jack chatted to the pirates and picked up a few more tips on how to sharpen your cutlasses. And they were all impressed by how brave he was. Finally, noon approached. "Prepare the plank," said Captain Blackheart. Jack stood up. He felt a bit nervous now, because although they had a plan, he couldn't be sure if it would work or not. The plank was stretched out from the side of the ship, and all the pirates drew their cutlasses and pointed them at Jack. "Walk, lad," said Captain Blackheart. Jack started to walk nervously along the plank. It was very wobbly, and he could see the waves down below. But just a little way ahead, he could see land, because Ben had reset the course of the ship to bring it closer to the harbour. Jack walked and walked and walked. Then splash! He was in the water. He could feel himself sinking, and the water was closing above his head. But then he reached for straw. He pushed it into the sheep's bladder and blew and blew and blew, and it inflated into a balloon. Jack grabbed hold of it and kicked his legs, and soon he was swimming towards shore. As he glanced behind, he could see the ship sailing away, and the pirates were cheering his death. "Ha! Fool them!" said Jack. And very soon he was back on dry land. As it happened, all the children were coming out of the sailing school he had meant to go to, and so he joined them and went home by the first train. And that evening he was safely reunited with his family. "Good to see you," said his dad, ruffling his hair. "Glad to see you escape those pirates without costing me a fortune in ransom money." "Well, yes," said Jack excitedly. "But I had to walk the plank, and there were—" But all his sisters were already laughing. "There goes Jack with all his silly pirate stories again." But as he went to bed that night, Jack knew it was all true, and he wondered if he'd ever see the pirate school again. One day, he thought. Just maybe. And that's the end of Jack and the Pirate School. Phew! I'm glad he got safely back to land, aren't you? Don't forget, there are more great stories every week at storynori.com. Until next time, from me, Natasha, bye-bye!